use the raise your hand function to request to speak, only and speak when invited to do so by the chair. Please switch off your camera and microphone when not speaking, and remember to set your mobile phone to silent for the duration of the meeting. Any views expressed by any speaker in this meeting are the speaker's own, and they do not necessarily reflect the views of the council. Please can councillors be aware that the webcast will continue to be streamed live for 20 seconds after the close of the meeting. This is due to a time delay in transmitting live. I will now confirm the names of the other members of this committee: Councillor Bell, Councillor Clark, Councillor Collins, Councillor Cross, Councillor Groovy, Councillor R. McEwen, Councillor Quinn, Councillor Reddy, Councillor Siddle, Councillor Sizeland, and Councillor Joe Taylor. So, Rachel, do we have any apologies for absence?
With apologies from Councillor Groovy.
Okay, thank you. And then on to the second part of the agenda, to receive disclosures of interest of any matters before the committee. Do we have any disclosable pecuniary interests? No? Okay. Any other interests that anybody wants to declare? No? Thank you, everybody. And on to item 3, any matters referred to the committee under the call-in procedure. I'm not aware of any unless we've had any at a late stage.
None, Chair.
Fabulous, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is item 4, to approve the minutes of the previous meeting, which is pages 3 to 8. Has anybody got any comments on the minutes of the previous meeting? Anything to add or any amendments? No. Okay. Could I have a proposer and seconder for the minutes, please? Councillor Taylor and Councillor McEwen. Thank you very much. I know it wasn't quite in that order, but everybody put their hand up at the same time, so those are the ones that I got. So the next item on the agenda is the Select Committee Work Programme, pages 9 to 12. I think Councillor Siddle, you wanted to say something here? Ed?
Yeah, sorry, the computer just didn't want to work and allow me to speak. So yeah, on the 25th of this month, we've got a economy and growth where we are focusing on the central area and looking at various issues around that. I'd like to extend the invite to all central area councillors to attend and obviously participate in the agenda on that particular evening. So if any of if any of you are not here tonight, or any of you group members are not here tonight, it'd be great if you could pass on the information. I've sent it to my group as well, our Labour group as well. But obviously, it'd be welcome to see people from the central area, because we want to have as much debate as possible.
Councillor Sizeland, I can see you got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I missed the date of that. When was it, Ed?
25th. You're on economy and growth, aren't you?
Yeah.
So it's in New Mills Town Hall. It's the 25th of September.
Right, okie doke.
I'm not sure if the agenda's been published yet. I'm just checking out. I don't think I've seen the agenda, but it's focusing on the central area. So that's why I've asked for it to be held in a central location rather than being held on Teams or held in Buxton, because I think it's better to be in the area, even if obviously it's only just for the fact that we are in like New Mills or somewhere else. So that's why I asked for it to be in one of the central area towns.
That's great, thank you.
Chair, can you just comment that the agenda will be published on Wednesday?
Brilliant,
Thanks,
that's great.
Rachel.
So obviously if anyone's got any questions or wants to raise anything with me, obviously give us a ring or speak to Andrew or Lorraine, because I think they're the two leads on that.
Thanks, Ed. I'll give you a call actually about something else in that area offline. I've only got one thing to add from Corporate Select. So I asked Vicky Mitchell to do a map for me of all the assets that the council owns around the theatre in Buxton, purely because I couldn't really ascertain from the list exactly what was owned by High Peak Borough Council and what wasn't owned by High Peak Borough Council. And I get the sense that that's a problem for a lot of councillors. I see a lot of traffic along the lines of, do we own? And when you look at the list, it's not entirely clear what the parcel of land is that High Peak Borough Council own. I think it's something that we're going to have to do for local government reorg anyway, because when you look at Derbyshire County Council's website, they do map their own assets and where those assets are and the parcels of land that they own. And it was quite enlightening for me, because in Buxton there is a specific piece of land on St John's Road which has turned into a parking lot where people get forced out into the traffic who have wheelchairs and buggies and things. And I didn't actually think we owned it. And subsequently looking at the mapping, I can see that we do own it. So that's giving me something to do, but it actually reinforces to me that I think that that's something that we need to do. I think there's probably some capacity in the council to do it. And I also think it would allow us to look across the entire borough at small little bits of land and whether or not we should be planning to either divest of them or come up with some other type of strategy for them. So I will be adding that when I can speak to Martin again, but he's not here tonight because he was off on an Ironman triathlon type event. So has anybody got anything else they want to add to the select committee work programme? No, okay. So moving on, I think this is over to you, Alan, for the first quarter finance, performance and procurement report, pages 13 to 58.
Just letting me camera wake up, to say nothing of me, but there you go. Right, first quarter. Now, this is obviously, the first quarter is always indicative in terms of its figures, and some first quarters do have some wild variance, as indeed this one has. So without further ado, the general fund, as you can see on the summary sheet on page 14, the general fund provisional outturn for 25-26 is forecast to be about 159,000 underspent. The efficiency programme, we looked and found 48,000, and there's 62,000 still to get for the rest of the year. So that, I think, is quite well on track. In terms of the HRA, the capital, sorry, that both the HRA and the capital for the general fund will be in which they will be underspent. The HRA itself will have a 1 point. I've written it down wrong, I think. No, I haven't. 1.36 million pounds deficit. Excuse me, that's 300k more than the actual budget, but I'll come on to that when we get to the particular section. The collection rates basically are on track for as they have been for the previous year. The sundry debt, as I reported in Q4 of last financial year, is 451,000, and that's primarily due to Derbyshire County Council owing us probably 90-odd% of that, and that is still working its way through the system. Right, now if you look at page 18, the table on page 18, you'll see at the bottom there it says that the projected surplus stroke deficit, and in this case surplus, will be 1.312 million. And you think, flipping heck, that's an awful lot of money. However, 1.047 million have been received from government grants that are not part and parcel of the budget, and I'll talk more about those in section 2.8. So, in terms of there are three significant areas of projected underspends: regeneration, over £312,000, The Springs is forecast to be in a positive trading of 182,000, and of course, any money that we make on the we show in terms of profit or a positive position will be earmarked for the Springs development. UK Prosperity Fund is applied to the time spent by our staff on the projects, and that's going to be £57,000 underspent compared to budget. We've had a loss of income is forecast due to the reopening of Glossop indoor markets of nearly 50,000. Customer services, 160,000 underspent, mainly due to staff turnover, because it says it's been a challenge to recruit. However, I do know that we have taken on 3, or we're about to take on 3 people in this area that are not covered by this the first quarter figures. So that's looking a bit better, I think. Corporate finance, the corporately held budgets which remain unallocated at this stage of the year include £95,000 provided for a loss of income by MyActive on Glossop, and this is due to the rack problems that we are repairing at a very, very quick rate of knots, I'm very, very pleased to say. There are 2 areas of projected overspend. One's environmental health and the other one is waste collection. Environmental health, the expenditure is forecast to utilise a grant funding from the previous year being held in reserves of about 65,000 for healthier homes and 12,400 for air pollution. The waste collection increased pay award and vehicle parts in terms of obviously having to repair the vehicles are offset by a forecast on rebates for recycling income, and fuel basically is a little bit cheaper now, as we all know, to the tune of about 45,000. There is a reduction in joint operating profit forecast from the company of 54,000. A change notice for simpler recycling has a cost implication, which is the collection of food every week, and that's 174,000. The majority of which is funded by a reserve we created for the grant received in previous years. And there is a deficit of 147,000 forecast on net interest, as detailed in section 9, and we'll talk about that later. And if there's any serious questions about that, Emily has got it all at her fingertips and will sort it out for us. Right, this forecast of outturn on funding for the year is 1.154 more than budget. This is from central government. So it's external funding. Basically, the business rates has increased by 382,000, primarily due to the pool. Other external funding are, sorry, gadget's just gone off, are 130,000 shortfall in employer national insurance contributions, and almost 800,000 what they call extended producer responsibility. And at this stage, the cost implications are unclear, as indeed are the instructions of how to spend and what we can spend it on. So at the moment, that's the government, unless they have done recently, they haven't told us exactly how we can spend this. Efficiency programs I talked about is we've found 47, there's 62 to find. AES themselves, the company, as I said, is budgeted to make a profit of 41,000 attributed to the councils, but is now forecasting that loss of 49,000, which is what I've just basically said. And the main reasons for that is exactly what I said previously. Alliance Norse. Now then, the provisional outturn is a net surplus of 33,400 across the revenue services, made up of an improvement of 57,000 on the discount and profit for cleaning and caretaking. Also 74,000 net underspend on estates, as the provision was not a full capacity for the start of the year during our recruitment of the new roles. Alliance Leisure. This is one that obviously we've just set this up last year, and the money's still working its way through, and we've got Buxton closed, due to the RAC. The Springs, I've mentioned about the increase, so that money will be going into our reserve to use against the Revitalising Buxton project. Housing revenue account. So this is, as I said, quite a big loss, but it is budgeted, not loss, but deficit. And it is actually budgeted, but I think it's £300,000 extra. And it says in section 6, the set was with a deficit of HRA budget was set as a deficit of 468,000, and we've brought the 25-26 budget now to a deficit of 1.07 million, because this is that's right, the capital budget has been revised at the first. So provisional outturn expenditure on the HRA 18.7, but with the estimate of 17.3 million, this represents a deficit of the year of 1.363 million. And Keith will talk to us about the timing of these things. And it sounds an awful lot of money, but as I say, as part of the budget, it was budgeted to run using reserves, which we carry quite a lot of reserves on the HRA. And we talked about the capital. Additional budgets that have been approved on the capital above and beyond the actual budget itself. Due to the RAC in Glossop, we've actually got we allocated another £300,000 for the repairs on this, and Victoria Halls in Glossop, the executive in June 2025 approved another 613,000 on a new project refurbishment. This is looking at the ground floor and basement, and partly funded by the UK Prosperity Fund to the tune of 125,000. This is all in section 7.4, by the way. Manor Park Sports Court, additional £90,000 from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund towards the refurbishments, and this is in addition to the £100,000 already allocated. And I see three significant variances to the forecast. Property services are 709,000 underspent, and this several projects under the asset management plan have been reprofiled, including the Pavilion Gardens re-roofing, which is now expected to be completed this current financial year. ICT 342,000 underspent. Replacement of ICT systems is being reviewed as a result of the local government reorganisation. As you may remember, we were going to spend in excess of £1 million buying new software, but given that local government is coming in, we're now looking at all our potential partners within the area, and we now know what systems they're currently running to try and have, if you like, getting in ahead of the game to say that we're using the same systems in terms of of computers. Leisure services, 105,000 underspent, and that's down to banks. The Bankswood play area refurbishment is rescheduled for spring next year. Right, let's get down to Emily's section in terms of investments and treasury management. The council had
Should we
budgeted.
Yeah. Alan, I think Councillor Bell's got a question.
Oh, okay.
Or was that a previous hand you had up, Pauline?
No. It's a question you've probably been asked loads of times. I apologise for asking it again. £50,000 loss of earnings because of the Glossop Market Hall. Do we know it's definitely opening in November? You know, because if we lost 50,000 in one quarter, in the first quarter, how much more are we losing if it's not opening?
I'm afraid we'll have to.
Opening?
Probably the best. Well, Keith's put his hand up. I was going to say Keith or the leader would know more officially. Thank you.
I just wanted to say, Alan, that the £50,000 estimate is a projection for the year, so it's not for just the first quarter. So
yes.
It's based on what's known now. We're projecting 50,000 in the year, perhaps, but not just on quarter one.
Yeah, sorry, Pauline.
Not quite so bad then. Thank you.
We've got a couple more now. Oh no, Joanne, is it? You're on silent.
I thought I'd just let you come up for air a bit,
yes,
because you were doing so well. So, Councillor Collins.
Yeah, I've got a few questions. One was Pauline's, but I mean, Glossop Halls has been running on so long that it really makes the Buxton refurbishment very worrying, because if, you know, there have been constant delays with what essentially you'd think would be a simpler project, how on earth is the Central Buxton stuff going to happen on time or at all or within budget? So I just wondered if the council was kind of looking at that, really.
Yes, we are, and as I say, I'm the purse strings person. I'll defer to the leader, or is he on? Is Anthony on?
He is. He's there. Do you want to come in, Anthony?
Thanks, Chair. So I note Councillor Collins' comments, I note Councillor Bell's comments. To a certain extent, whilst it may appear as an easy project, we all need to remember that whilst this part of the Glossop Halls project started off as one thing, it's then developed into other things to essentially what the project is now. For those of us longer in the tooth, it originally started off as an intention just to replace the Market Hall roof. We were able to secure additional funding throughout the process, so that's why the project has taken longer and got more complicated. We also had COVID in the middle, which sort of didn't help on the timeline, so it has ended up a lot more complicated project than it was when it originally started. The Glossop Hall set also covers Victoria Hall as well, and there's some final discussions going on in terms of works there to restore as much as we can of the building sort of back into use. And there's discussions going on with the Friends of Victoria Hall around those works to get them completed in the near future. Thanks, Chair.
Well, actually, with respect, Anthony, that wasn't my question, which was what's the council doing to mitigate against what is clearly risks on the Central Buxton project? And there's nothing to say that too won't have, let's say, unexpected things popping up as it goes along. So I hope the council is considering the risks of things not going to plan, I suppose.
So yeah, but mate, just in terms of the Revitalising Buxton project, to a certain extent, we've already started that type of work. As part of the process to get the planning permission secured, etc. We've implemented a planning agreement with the developers. So there's additional support being brought in to make sure that we can try and keep to the timetable as much as we can as possible in terms of getting sort of that part of the project signed off. Once the work start on site, although efforts have been made to sort of put in, additional bits of support around it, to a certain extent, we can try our best endeavours. But once you start sort of, to a certain extent, smashing things up, you can't always guarantee that things will go right, but we are trying to put in place what measures we can. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, so Anthony, I think on that point, at the next committee meeting, I'd like to see the risk register for the Buxton regeneration project.
I have got another question, if that's okay.
So Joanna, was that what you were getting at?
Well, yes, it was. It was a sort of, how are the risks, including risks of overruns in both time and money, being mitigated?
So I don't think we've seen the risk register for this project, either audit or corporate select. So I think we should see that risk register. The scrutiny.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. My other thing was, I may have misunderstood this, but as far as I understood, the efficiency savings are going very well. But there seem to be efficiency savings from AES when there's also projected overspend for AES. I don't quite get that. I'll just put the page numbers, that's not very clever. Page 21. So this I just sort of didn't completely understand. Oh, councillor controlled companies it is actually, to be fair. So it may not just be AES.
No, it isn't.
Okay. Okay, well that probably explains it then. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So Alan, I thought you'd been doing a sterling job there, giving us all the information. So I thought it was worth a couple of questions.
No. Well, when you're in person, you see, you can actually, when we did it last time in person, it was a lot easier because I came up for breath each section and then and allowed people, but allowed people to speak, and I think that worked better. But quarter one is slightly different. I think Pauline's still got a hand up as well.
I think that was from before. Did you just not take it down before, Councillor Bell? Well, Councillor, I think, hang on, did Councillor Sizeland just put her hand up? Hang on.
She has, yes. She
has, okay. So, Councillor Sizeland.
Okay, there's just a couple of things I'm concerned about. The service charges are in arrears on the Springs. That's page 27. And the amount of time it's taking us to turn around the voids, that's off track, but obviously there are concerns because people are really needing housing and there's a big shortage. What can we do to increase the turnaround time?
Or decrease the turnaround time, I think.
Sorry.
we are increasing it, but we want to decrease it. But yes, I do take your point, Councillor Sizeland, yes. Right. I mean, AES are, in fact, I asked at one at the board meeting in terms of voids, and I wanted to know, and they're going to look into a number of voids that have certainly happened in my ward, and I am waiting for them to come back to you, or to me, sorry. So it is something that I took up at the last board meeting, which was only a couple of weeks ago, in fairness. So, or I asked virtually that very question. There are times where people don't do anything and haven't done anything, and some voids are in a dreadful state. But on the other hand, some voids are in quite a good state, and we can then just give them a little bit of decoration, clean, and then re-let them. But some, I'm afraid, and also people are ill, and they that also takes time as well. Oh, Keith's coming in.
Just to add, Alan, to that, that the part of the HRA loss on rent income's down to void properties being void.
Yeah.
But when the properties become empty and void, opportunities then taken for A&L to do perhaps some of the bigger works that would otherwise be disruptive to tenants at the same time. So that does extend the void period, loses a certain amount of rent, but in the longer term, it puts these properties into a better condition for them to be rented out going forward without the interruption. So we're kind of being opportunistic when a property becomes vacant and void to do the works necessary at that time. So it does have a detrimental impact initially, but you benefit from that as the stocks improve going forward.
Indeed.
Councillor Quinn?
Yeah, sorry, just picking up on that, and maybe going a bit off topic, but looking at the voids, we're talking about contractors, external contractors, and I was kind of linking that to the public toilets in Buxton. We didn't start repairing those for ages and ages because we were looking for contractors. It's run on and on, you know, we've gone all the way over summer with no toilets. Should we be looking at our capacity for workers rather than searching around for contractors, which are losing us money in terms of council house rents, etc., and also not doing us any favours when we're looking at repairs to things like toilets?
Good question. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we do in terms of that, of our own houses, of course, is done by Norse, which is our own solely owned company with Staffordshire Moorlands. And in terms, I must admit, I don't know the in terms of the Buxton toilets, but I also see that Anthony has got his hand up, so I'll let him answer that one. You're on mute.
Thanks. Yeah, just in terms of what we're trying with North, we're trying to sort of do where we can, we're trying to increase our own workforce so that we can do more of the work directly. However, in some cases, the two sets of toilets that we're currently got work underway at the moment, both the Buxton and the Chapel ones, are both cases where we've needed external contractor support. In the case of the Buxton ones, it's because there's a particular issue around the new doors that we're putting in place as part of the process, which will include the charging for it. That's taken longer than we would have liked, but we're on the home rate, I'm told, for that, so that should be sorted out fairly soon. The Chapel ones are a whole other level of complication, but again, we're having to engage specialist contracts with that, which again has just added additional time to it. So where we can, we're trying to increase the capacity internally so that we don't have to go to external contractors. But for some of the work that we're doing, we do still have to go out for external contractors. Thanks.
Thanks, Anthony. Okay, back to you, Alan.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that I'm on the home straight. I've got down to Treasury Management, and then that's it. Right. So the council has budgeted to receive 487,000 in general fund investment income for this current financial year. Based on the expectation of reduced interest rates over the year, which we've seen the Bank of England lowering their Bank of England rate, and a smaller investment portfolio, whilst internal borrowing is utilised during the high borrowing interest period, a shortfall of 117,000 is forecast against the budget. So the internal borrowing is something that it would cost us a lot more money to borrow rather than taking it out of our money that we would normally put into bonds and things. I'll let Emily explain it for the more detail. Is she there? Emily?
Oh, there she is.
There she is.
Yes, quite right, Alan. When we are looking at the need to borrow, it is often more expensive to externalise that borrowing. And we're waiting really for the time when interest rates hopefully do come a little further down, and then we can put some fixed borrowing in place and have a little more certainty about our borrowing costs. But at the moment, of course, we don't want to do that because the costs are so high. So we are utilising the reserves that we've got available to us at the moment temporarily. And that enables us to utilise that instead of external borrowing. However, of course, it does eat into our investment portfolio that we could have to earn interest income on. So yes, it's the best option we have at the moment, but yeah, it does hamper our investment income opportunities.
Thanks, Emily. Has anybody got any more questions? No. Okay, so I think the next bit is the first update procurement review.
Yep. As of starting at page 13, we've got the list there, 39, in terms of the completed activity for High Peak Borough Council. And then on page 41, we have the joint procurement where we join forces with our sister councils, Staffordshire Moorlands. If there's anything there, obviously you can see the Springs development on page 40, and that's a one-off, and that's the framework for the Springs development, which is nearly £2 million. That is budgeted. In terms of the joint ones, I don't think there's anything of significance, of that significance. If there are any questions.
No, I guess it becomes difficult to unpick all of that as we go towards reorganisation. Councillor Collins. Joanna, you're on mute.
Sorry, somewhere I can't find it now. Actually, it says page 40, but I can't see it on page 40. Is 49,000 for Visit Peak District and Derbyshire.
It's
that's on that page.
Fourth one up from the bottom. East Midlands Chamber Visit Peak District.
Oh, it's that. Yeah. Yes, I looked. This is of interest to me because of the number of visitors in the Hope Valley, 1.3 million to around Mam Tor last year. Yeah. So, and I know that the council has tried to get visitors to other places, but the first page of the website has 8 walks, 4 are in the Hope Valley. I think that considering how much money the council is giving to Peak District in Derbyshire, the council ought to be able to say, please, will you not put the Hope Valley on your first page for High Peak? Please put all the other places that people could go, especially as nobody, well, I can't say nobody, but actually most visitors to the Hope Valley don't spend any money because it's not very urban. There are not very many places to spend money. So please, can the council push for better? It's got better, but it's still not nearly as good as it could be in terms of promoting other places.
I shall get the leader to take that on board. As I say, I'm to do with the finance.
Well, it is finance as well,
yes,
because it's how much money you're giving people, and are they giving you what you're asking for?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I did notice as well, Joanna, one of the apps, I think it was All Trails, for about a month had Mam Tor as their primary advertising.
I know,
across the entire country.
If you've got it flaunting.
Well,
no, it's true, isn't it? I mean, it's a beautiful place, so.
But it's getting less beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So any other questions on procurement? If not, we'll move on to the performance and customer feedback report.
There's not a lot to say with this. It's all self-explanatory in terms of that. I see Tanya's on the call, so if there's any major concerns at that, then I'm sure Tanya will have all the relevant answers. I can't see her though now at the moment. Oh, she is there. Bob McEwen's got his hand up for now.
Hi, Councillor McEwen.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question. Council issued a press release last week about aggression towards staff on customer services.
Yes.
I just wonder if there was a problem with it.
Tanya?
Yeah, we have seen an increase in violence and aggression towards staff, particularly around some enforcement activity to do with the in the housing area, over communal areas, where we've been working with Derbyshire Fire and Rescue to come up with some plans, but that article has been issued as a reminder that, you know, it's not acceptable. But we have been seeing an increase in events where staff have felt threatened.
Yeah, thank you, because, you know, do such a good job. What they was doing, especially with Grenfell, was a very, very serious safety thing where they had to remove mats or something. And, you know, we heard that the staff was getting quite a lot of aggravation over that, and it's just totally unjust. As councillors, we try to explain to anybody complaining, we don't want another Grenfell, we don't want another fire. You've got to think of the other tenants in your block.
Indeed.
You know, I think it's totally unfair that the staff got the abuse for that, you know, and they was working mainly on behalf of the fire brigade. Thank you.
I have a question, Tanya. On page 55, or it might not be for you, on page 55, we seem to have had an increase, if I'm reading this correctly, in complaints about waste and recycling.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't have the details of the actual complaints, but if you want, I can pass it on and get a response to you about what is actually causing that increase.
I think, if I'm right, Councillor Quinn, you've got AES at the next. Oh, is it AES? Sorry, you've got them at the next community, haven't you?
Yes, we have. Yeah.
So it might be a question for there rather than
yeah,
or jointly. Just one observation I'd make about this personal experience. My wife put some mulberry paper in the green bin, so they refused to take it. It's compostable, right? So they refused to take it, and what they did was they put a label on the green bin to tell me that they'd refused to take it because there was something in the bin that shouldn't be there. And rather surprisingly, the label that they put on the bin to tell me all this was made of plastic, which I thought, that can't be right. So if you can ask them about that as well, Councillor Quinn, when you see them.
Yeah, I've also got a little question about that, and it sort of comes into to this because I did notice the executive meeting. I was on holiday, but I've looked at it since about the waste, garden waste, and we're assuming that about 50% of people will recycle that. Are there any cost considerations if we've got loads of people putting their garden waste into the normal rubbish, or we have fewer people recycling? Have we factored that into costs in the future? I suppose that could be asked of AES as well, I guess.
Yeah, so I guess it's what the plan is for that.
Yeah.
When they're community. I mean, I guess it might lead to more complaints. So I guess it's something that we need to keep an eye on because it's a significant spike upwards.
Yeah.
Councillor Sizeland, then Councillor Todd.
I was just concerned about paying our bills. There's quite a lot of money owing to people that are over 60 days old, so that's a couple of months, isn't it? I just thought, you know, it's rather worrying for businesses at the moment, and can we do better?
Can I ask Keith for that? That's something I must admit, Sir Councillor Sizeland, I'm with you on that. If we owe money, then we should be paying it.
Sorry, Councillor Sizeland, are you referring to the debt outstanding in section of the finance report?
Page 54.
54. This is what I mentioned. Thank you for that, Keith. This is what I mentioned in my preamble to this statement, that you know, we're owed. This is collection rates. Yeah, this is the sundry debtors, which I mentioned, and basically Derbyshire County Council owes thick end of 450,000 quid.
Oh, that's the...
Yep.
Oh, I thought that we were owing.
No, this is
right, okay,
sundry debtors.
Yeah, no, but okay.
Sorry, I didn't know which one you were talking about. My apologies.
Okay.
Councillor Todd.
Well, I was just going to mention with the compostable paper or that you mentioned, those sort of things, they have to be to a certain standard, like, you know, the compostable bags that we supply for food waste. It has to be to a certain standard.
What I found aggravating about it, Jean, was they could have taken it out of the brown bin and put it in the brown. They could have taken it out of the green bin and put it in the brown bin. It would have taken 1 second to do that. But instead, they decided to go back to the van, get a plastic label, bring it all the way to my green bin and put a plastic label on my green bin. That's what I found irritating about it.
I suppose they may have thought it was ordinary paper, but yeah.
It tells me something about them as a company, that they have not got the best interests of residents at the primary focus of their interest.
Well,
that is why I'm interested in why complaints are going up.
Okay, it's a fair thing.
Looking at that list of complaints on stage 2 complaints, a lot of them weren't upheld.
Well, it doesn't matter really if people have. So there's something about a trend. When you see a trend like that, Jean, and someone says to me they're not upheld, I think, why would people suddenly start complaining about things that weren't true? It's a spike, and we need to understand that spike. And by the way, the last time someone told me that something was not upheld, when they went to look at the video, it then was suddenly upheld. So I'm not personally buying all that. Sorry, Councillor Siddle.
Can I just add there? Sorry. With the let me see. I've forgotten what I was going to say now. Okay, I'll leave it. Sorry, I forgot.
That's right, but you got my point, Jean, that it was.
Oh, yes. I think I did have a complaint the other day from somebody that the bin men sometimes don't seem to know what should go in things, and I think I will be getting back to them to give them some education about that if they've not had that kind of education.
I see. Councillor Siddle.
Yeah. Obviously, customers have got the opportunity to take it stage 1, stage 2, and depending on what sort of complaint it is, they can either go to the housing ombudsman or another regulatory or authority or body to look at it. Now, I'd be interested to know how many stage 1 complaints were rejected as opposed to stage, and that was rejected at stage 1. That actually went to stage 2, and how many stage 2 were rejected at stage 1 but upheld at stage 2? That would be a more interesting fact to me. And the second thing about the bins, if people putting the wrong things in the bin and the council and the staff keep emptying and taking the stuff out of the bin, it could be it may not solve the problem. They may keep putting the same thing in. So I think there's got to be a way of, if we remove something from a bin, we put this was in the bin, we've taken it out of the bin, please don't put it in again. If something's got to be put to the bin. And I think the reason why they put sticky labels on is because if you put paper label on, it rains and it will get ruined. I don't know whether there's any other way that it could be done.
This is the thing, Ed, right? It isn't a sticky label. It's like the sort of tab that you put on your hotel room that says,
like
a room cleaned.
Oh yeah,
it goes on the bin and it's made of plastic.
Yeah, but I think we've got to alert customers somehow that they're putting the wrong rubbish in, and also I think as well that they should. I don't know whether it feeds through to the call centre, because it's what we used to get when I worked on the call centre before I left. I moved to a different job at my other council I worked for. Is that if there should be an alert that's sent through from the bin crew to the call centre to say this is the reason why the bin has not been emptied. So then when they ring up or they go online and say it's not been emptied, you can turn around and say, well, there's a label on it, this is why, and then we can go back to them and say this is what needs to be done to remove it. Or we just book it in as, if it's completely contaminated, we just book it in as a miscollection and warn the customer that if they keep contaminating the recyclables, then their bin will be taken off them. I don't know whether that happens, but
I get that, Ed, but I'm making the point that there's a trend here. Q1 last year to Q1 this year. If we see that trend again in Q2, we've got a problem. And this is a reoccurring theme. So you remember we spoke about the fact that people didn't fix the bin lids. They just left them broken. There's something not right in the way that this organisation is being managed, that's focusing on the people who pay the wages to run the thing. So last year we spoke about this when we saw a spike, and we talked about the hinges and the fact that nobody replaces the hinges, and then all the lids blow off. And now we find ourselves in a position where when there's an issue about compostable waste, someone sticks a plastic label on the bin. And just think about that for a second and think about how that looks if you're a customer of this service. It's not good. And we've got a trend. So I want that to be kept an eye on. And I think Rachel should ask some fairly pointed questions when we see them at community.
I will take what's been said here, as I'm sure Tanya will as well. And I'll ask that very question for you, Chris.
Cool. Okay, fab. Okay, so any more questions? Now, I think this was to just note. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Chris. I just wanted to agree with you about the bins. I've had a couple of cases. I know for a fact that they were telling the truth, but about the bin lids, but I couldn't get anything done about it. They just blanked me, and that was it. Yeah, and I know for a fact those people weren't telling lies.
Yeah, that's sort of what's concerning me, Kath. Sorry, Councillor Collins.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, to back up what Kath is saying, I know this should be for communities, but we can prepare ourselves, that, yeah, I mean, essentially AES have implicitly accused customers of telling lies. You know, one customer just said, well, I can't do any more. I saw what I saw. So, yeah.
I'll take that up on the board meeting. Okay.
Okay. So thanks, Councillor Barrett. So this was to note. So I think we've noted it. There was nothing to vote on. So can we move on to agenda item 7, which is the empty property strategy, which is something I think we've all been looking forward to for a little while. So thanks, Joanne.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'll just, whilst I'm speaking, I'll just make sure this presentation is there and share it with you. Okay, so can everybody see that? Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Okay. Right. So so the report that we've put forward tonight is around the empty property strategy that's been reviewed and updated along with the N4 sales policy. So basically what we're asking tonight is that the report recommends that Corporate Select Committee recommends that the exec approve the empty property strategy at Appendix A and the N4 sales policy at Appendix B. So to highlight the updates in the strategy and explain what we've been doing in order to bring empty properties back into use, myself and Alicia have drafted a presentation that we're going to go through with you tonight. I'm going to explain what's happening on the revenue side, and then I'll hand over to Alicia, who will explain what the process is for the environmental health team. And then we're happy to take any questions at the end of the presentation. So just looking at slide 1. So we've reviewed the strategy to increase focus and invest additional resource to tackle empty properties. We now have a cross-service officer working group led by Martin Owen, the Executive Director, who are all involved in bringing empty properties back into use. Within this group, we have staff from the revenues team, environmental health, regeneration team and planning team. So there's a lot of collaborative working now on the empty strategy team, which obviously we didn't have previously. So we're all sort of pooling together, meeting on a regular basis to see what we need to do, what actions we can tick off, what we need to do going forward. So I think the knowledge and expertise now that we're all sharing within this group are really valuable to completing the actions within the strategy. We've provided information relating to the current context and figures, which I can give you later on in another slide. And the enforced sales policy has been updated, and we've reflected a broader definition of empty properties and any updated powers from central government. So the objectives of the strategy. So the objectives are to bring empty properties back into use using a range of advice, assistance and support. Within the revenues team, we have a revenues inspector, and within the environmental health team, we have an empty homes officer. So we're aiming to use enforcement action to bring long-term problematic empty homes back into use, raise awareness of empty property issues, understand why homes are empty, and where possible, minimise the number of properties that become long-term empty properties. We have actually written out to 62 homeowners of properties where they've been standing empty and unoccupied for over 5 years to try and establish the reasons why those properties are standing empty. But unfortunately, we've only received 5 responses, equivalent to 8% response rate. Reasons there were that the property was standing empty because they were hoping to renovate the property, either trying to sell the property or due to move in and occupy the property at some point in the future. So there are things that we have been trying to sort of glean out of empty property homeowners, but as you can see from the figures that I've just given there, it's quite difficult to establish the reason for some of the longer term empty properties. We're trying to have a look at the balance and the need for new builds with making the best use of the existing stock that we've got, discourage antisocial behaviour, vandalism, crime and fear of crime, and improve housing conditions, the vitality of the build environment and prevent the deterioration of the buildings. So what is determined as an empty home? So for council tax purposes, an empty home is one that is unoccupied and substantially unfurnished. There's no real definition in legal terms of substantially unfurnished, but what we're basically looking at is the size of the house. For example, if somebody had got a bed, dining room table, a sofa where we think potentially they could actually live there, sleep there, then we would probably still class that as unfurnished. So we're looking at unfurnished with just bits of furniture in there that make us think that it couldn't actually be habitable, that nobody could actually live in the property. The empty property strategy focuses therefore on properties that have been empty for over 6 months. But from the environmental health team perspective, they will deal with complaints whether they're under 6 months or actually over 6 months. So it's only council tax that we're currently focusing on over 6 months where they've been unoccupied and unfurnished. And then there are some properties that are unoccupied and exempt and are treated differently. So one of the examples there is an occupier is now resident in a home. We have some exemptions where people have passed away and we're waiting for probate to be granted. And there is a table within the report and the strategy that actually lists those type of exemptions and the numbers there that are quite interesting to look at. But when we're looking at determining the empty homes, we're looking at those that are unoccupied and substantially unfurnished and not exempt. So looking at the current numbers of residential empty homes in the High Peak area, we've currently got a total of, where are we here, 981. So a little bit less than we had in 2024, but not a great deal less. And you can see there that between 0 to 6 months, we have 377 properties. These are what we tend to call the transitional properties, where we know that within that period, it's likely that somebody is going to move in or rent the property out. So when we then look over 6 months, we've got 332 that fall within that category. And then we hit with a premium from the 1 year now. So from 1 to 5 years, we've got 213 properties that have got 100% premium. That means that they pay 200% council tax. 5 to 10 years, we've got 38 properties with a 200% premium. That means they pay 300% council tax. And then we've got 21 where the property's been standing empty and unfurnished for over 10 years. With a premium of 300%, so they pay 400% council tax. So, sort of looking at the stats there, what we've got in the empty property strategy, it shows that we've got around probably 1.4% of dwellings within the High Peak area that are empty and have been for more than 6 months. And also it shows on the table that from the financial year 2021, we'll see that these figures have been slightly increasing, although we've seen a slight reduction from 24 to 25. From 21, you will see that the figures have been creeping up. And just some interesting sort of stats there for you. Having looked at the properties where we've applied the premium, we've got 83.57 of those accounts where they're paying the council tax premium up to date. So the other sort of percentage, it doesn't mean that they're not paying. We still do have some people paying but are falling behind. We've got some people that aren't paying, and obviously we're taking recovery. But then comparing that to the premium that we have recently put on the second homes of 100%, that shows that 96.2 people are actually paying that premium second home. So I think you can see, looking at that figure, that there are some people where we have applied the premium are struggling to pay. And you know, if you look at a property that's got the 400% premium, some of the council tax instalments per month are significantly high to pay there. So just moving over to the next slide. So the input from council tax. So what we do in council tax, we annually upload all of the empty properties, the unoccupied and substantially unfurnished properties, to an external company called Experian. And what they actually do, they actually look at the risk of occupation. So, for example, we upload all 900 properties, and then they will send them back on a risk score of green, where they think that there's nobody in occupation, amber, potentially there could be somebody in occupation, red, it's likely that somebody is in occupation there. And what they do is they basically look at financial data. So, for example, if we've got an empty property, but somebody may have car finance there or mobile phone contract, paying car insurance, etc., that's what will flag that empty property up as either an amber or a red. And those are the properties that we tend to focus on. Now, we do know, as part of reviewing sort of properties like this, we do know that some people do fall under the financial sort of radar. But I think what we have to look at is the fact that we have just the one revenues inspector across Staffordshire Moorlands and High Peak. We have a very large geographical area, so it's very difficult for her to sort of visit every single empty property across both councils. So what we do is we try and focus on the ones where we think people are in occupation. And the way that we do that is we canvass all those that are a medium to higher risk property. Where the forms aren't returned, we will send a reminder, and if there's nothing that we can do from the desk, then the revenues inspector will go out and inspect the premises in the hope that, if they are now occupied, we can catch hold of somebody when we inspect the premises. If not, then we'll leave letters and forms to say that we believe the property is occupied, and people need to let us know either online or fill in a form and get back to us and give us the information. So from that, we've got the revenues inspector sort of out there physically on a frequent basis throughout the year. So she may come across some properties that are in a derelict state, that are causing blight and a nuisance to neighbours. So by sort of being out and about, that's where we have a good close relationship working with the Empty Homes Office Environmental and the Environmental Health team. So we can now share information, and that's vice versa. So the Empty Homes Officer, when she's out and about, she comes across something, she can share that data with us. So that's really valuable at the moment, and that is working really well. In addition to that, what we also do is we monitor new build properties with the aim of issuing a completion notice where necessary. So a completion notice falls in where somebody may build a new property, but they may then leave it standing empty and not complete for council tax purposes. So, for example, they may not put a bathroom in or a kitchen in, knowing full well that if it's not complete, they won't have to pay council tax. So what the revenues inspector does is she will inspect some of these type of properties, and if we think that type of work to get the property habitable can be completed within a 3 month time scale, then what we do is issue a completion notice to say that, having a look and inspected the property, we think that work can reasonably be completed. We'll issue a completion notice, which we will then send to the valuation office, who will bring it into the list, and then obviously the council tax becomes payable. And from a revenues perspective, we've actually implemented all the legislative powers that we've got now from central government to add premiums onto empty properties, second homes. And as you probably be aware, we also last year removed the discount that we gave where a property was empty between 0 and 3 months, and also removed the uninhabitable discount as well. So what we're trying to work on now within the revenues team is just having a look now at trying to sort of dig a bit deep and have a look at where we've removed discounts. Are people paying? Have we got problems there with recovery? And also, like I say, where we've applied the premium, and we've done that for this specific exercise, had a look at the percentage of people paying on time. We have, with the premiums, we have got a number of exceptions now that are mandatory that came into the legislation. So we do have a form on the websites, on the council's website, where people can apply for an exception. So that's for things such as if the property is empty and up for sale, we can give an exception up to 12 months if it's available to be let we can give an exception for up to 12 months. And also where somebody's deceased and probate's just been granted, we can give an exception. I haven't actually got the figures of the amount of exceptions we've received. I know we have had some. But I mean, I can, if you want a breakdown of this information, I'm willing to send that out to you, you know, after the presentation. So then just moving over to commercial properties. So we do annually inspect all commercial properties on business rates. We've got around 359 properties out of 3,800 businesses that are standing empty, so that's about 9.3%. But we don't have the premiums for empty properties in the business rate system like we do for council tax, so there's very little that we can do from a revenues perspective to try and get those commercial properties back into use. And some empty properties may not even be valued for business rates due to the condition that they're in. So, for example, I know across the Alliance, you know, we have some rather large mills, warehouses that are in such a dilapidated state that the valuation office don't even have them in the business rates list. So they don't actually become liable for business rates. So there's no incentive there to sort of get the property back into use or demolished and you know, the site built on. So that's a new part of the strategy that we're looking at to see what powers we can get from central government and also from the environmental health team, what powers, you know, we've got there that can assist to get some of these sort of unsightly commercial properties back into use. There are several exemptions for empty properties, some being listed buildings. So quite often we can see some very old buildings that are listed that are standing empty in a poor state, owners not wanting to repair them because of the cost. But the listed say they're exempt. Also, some small business rate properties, if the rateable value is below 2,900, they're exempt from paying empty rates. If any shops become empty, they get 3 months exemption. Before then, they pay the 100% empty rates. And also industrial properties can get 6 months exemption before they pay 100% empty rates. So that's all the slides from a revenues perspective from me. So I'll hand you over to Alicia and the environmental health team, who can just talk you through the work that's going on in her team and what they're doing to bring the empty properties back into use.
Thanks, Joanne. Over to you, Alicia, then.
Okay, that's great, thank you. So from an enforcement point of view, environmental health point of view, we've got lots of angles that we are tackling the empty properties with, and we are committed to bringing the empty properties back into use by encouraging and supporting the homeowners through the empty home strategy. The empty properties officer is here to work with the owners, providing them with advice and support and assistance in returning their property to use. Enforcement action can also be considered where there does seem to be no reasonable prospect of the property returning to occupation. Information sheet gives an outline of the council strategy and provides some options and useful information for dealing with empty properties. So when we're made aware of an empty property, there is a fact sheet that we send out. Joe, if you could move on, thanks. So we acknowledge that empty properties can have a detrimental impact to the surrounding area and the community, and also that it's more likely to attract antisocial behaviour, pests and crime in the neighbourhood, also having damaging effects on property values in the street and the local area. The owners of the empty properties often live elsewhere and are unaware of the issues affecting that property and the neighbours. And in addition to this, there is an acute housing shortage across the country, leading to an increased need for us to build on greenfield sites. The council strongly believes that if you own a property, you also have a responsibility for it. And in owning an empty property costs money, whether it's through a mortgage, council tax, utility bills, house insurance, or just general maintenance and repair bills. If occupied, the property could provide a regular rental income, which would cover such bills, or a capital sum if you wanted to sell it. The property could also provide valuable housing resource for someone in need in the area. Every property in the area brought back into use provides a home for somebody, and if it is left empty for significant periods of time, it is more likely to attract squatters or antisocial behaviour, therefore costing the homeowner more money. There are several options available to the owner of the empty properties that would see their properties reoccupied. Okay, so upon notification, the process for environmental health is that we would determine whether it was residential or commercial. We would then decide which team it would be allocated to, or it may be allocated to several teams across environmental health, private sector housing, so pollution team, empty homes. And that would generally depend on the initial inquiry that's given, service request that we've received. If it's around a garden or around pest control, unsightly property, then it would just depend really on how we received that. So a physical inspection would be carried out, and we complete an inspection matrix. Following that inspection, we would need to establish ownership of that property. So where structural issues are very apparent with the property, or disrepair, we would report that against building control. We are doing a 360 view of all these properties and making sure that we signpost and ensure that all of the council sections are being involved with the empty properties. It's not just revenues and environmental health. There are other services that do need to be involved. Again, report any issues to planning or conservation. We'd issue relevant notices or letters, and the process then would continue until appropriate action has been taken to resolve the issue. Where possible, we do try and be flexible with the homeowners, and we would try an educational approach, because ultimately we want these properties back in. But if that fails, then we're going to have to go down the enforcement route, of which we served several notices on properties. So some of the success stories there, just to share with members tonight. This is an end terrace property. So empty property received the service request from a complainant of overgrown foliage in the garden of the empty property, and it was encroaching on their garden. The property was unoccupied since 2023, and the owner of the property was informed of these issues. Letters were sent, including advice and support that the council could provide to the empty property. The owner decided that it was their intention to sell the property. And the next slide shows the property was sold in auction in July 2020. The new owners have removed a lot of foliage and are improving the situation for the neighbouring property. Monitoring visits are undertaken to make sure that that is still on track, and letters have now been sent to the new owners advising them of the help and support from Highbury Borough Council, and the case is still progressing. So you can see the length of time as well that it can take with some properties to make sure that we can find the ownership of the property and we can get these works done. Another property there was a cottage style terrace property. Property was checked as part of the joint working with the empty property group. The revenue inspector had been to assess the property. It was placed in our top 10 of properties in High Peak Borough Council list due to the property being unoccupied since 2021, and the property was owned by a housing association. So sometimes it's not just private owners. Communication commenced with the housing association regarding the future of the property. And after a period of communication, the housing association decided to sell the property at auction. In September 2024, the property was sold at auction, and the new owner was contacted again following face-to-face meetings. Information was provided on grants and VAT relief for the homeowner, and the new owner occupier completed a redecoration of the property, and it is now occupied. So on the next slide, you can see there that the property is now occupied. So I do have some further stats and information. So since the empty property officer started her new role in November 2023, 20 properties have now been occupied from that original list. We do have 38 that remain on the list. 8 of those are commercial. So most of them are ongoing. Properties that are not causing an issue and have had no response, then we do keep visiting, we do keep speaking to the owners of the properties, and around any grant funding that might be available for them. Also, a lot of them can be probate cases, and that can take a long time because they can't sell the property until the probate has been granted. So there are all sorts of different issues that can happen with that property. Also, data sharing agreements with other local authorities to track down owners or next of kin. So it can be challenging. I think to get it to a point where we do see success and we do see that the properties are either sold on or occupied. Thank you, members. Any questions?
Thanks, Alicia. Right, I'm very good presentation. I suspect there'll be quite a few, so I've got my eyes peeled on hands up for anybody. Or is it that you've covered everything? Joanna.
Yeah, me again. Yes, I think this is really, really good, actually. I've got one just expression of concern, which is that, as you said, it's pretty difficult doing this. So has the council got the capacity, if they've got one revenue officer and one empty homes officer across 2 councils? So that's a bit of a concern. I did want to say, I mean, you mentioned greenfield sites, Alicia, and I think they're mentioned in the report as well. So I think that under objectives, if I can find them somewhere, I think they're right at the beginning of the report, aren't they? Somewhere. Yeah. There's balancing the need for new build with making the best use of his existing stock. And I wondered if you could sort of add something to that, just to show, that this is important for climate change as well, because I'm sure, renovated properties brought up back into use have far fewer carbon emissions than new builds. So balance the need for new build with making the best use of existing stock, thereby reducing carbon emissions, or something like that, just to show, that it's been considered. And along the same lines, and I've said this many times, on conservation and enhancement of biodiversity, there are no specific implications. Well, I would have thought there were if the strategy may reduce building on greenfield sites. So yeah, just those 2 things.
I guess that's to note, Joanna, yeah?
Yeah.
Councillor Quinn.
Well, perhaps change the objective if possible.
Okay, so given that recommendation is that we are going to approve the empty property strategy, Alan, when that goes back to the exec, can you just take Joanna's points on board about that element of the fact that it does have a positive impact returning a building to use, because you're not knocking it down and building a new one. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
Cool. Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, picking up on that, I think it's developing the point, and I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment or a sort of wish list. I think there are a lot more empty properties in terms of the disused hotels, etc., businesses that we have around, disused pubs, things that could be converted to residential properties, and I think they could make a really important contribution to the housing need for the borough. And I think that links in with Joanna's point about the fact that it's far better to convert existing properties than it is to actually go building on greenfield sites. I'd like to see us link in to the formation of the local plan. I think this is a really good thing, and I think it's valuable work, but I think it needs to have more direction in terms of right, okay, what contribution can we make, a real contribution to the housing need? And that has an implication for the environment, a massive one, and also for housing need. Now, I noticed it is really difficult when you're dealing with commercial properties, but there are many that could be converted. So I think it's really important that we appeal to central government to help us in terms of what enforcement we can bring in, and also in terms of planning, that we can work together on that, because I think it's absolutely crucial.
I guess, Rachel, to some extent, when you look at the way that the local plan works, we invite people who own commercial properties to suggest that those properties are right for conversion into residential. So I guess part of the question, Alicia, because I think you were covering the bit on commercial, is do we have those conversations with people? You mentioned the sort of mills that were falling apart. In the conversations you have, is that part of the conversation journey to say, well, have you considered conversion to residential and away from commercial?
Okay, so from a commercial aspect at the moment, that's in its infancy, I would say. And it would be probably regen and planning more than myself as environmental health. But we could certainly take that back to the group. Now, we are waiting for central government to give us those powers around commercial. So once they do filter through and come to us, hopefully, you know, maybe the end of the year, early next year, then, you know, our group will focus on commercial, and we do have members that sit in there from regeneration and planning as our joined up service. So, but at the moment we're in a bit of a straitjacket at the moment because we haven't got those powers really. So, you know, certainly that will develop as you know, as time goes on over the coming months.
Thanks, Alicia. Councillor McEwen, Bob McEwen.
Yep, thank you, Chair. I think an example of this is the Royal at Hayfield. The large disused pub is falling apart. Planning's playing their part by issued various notices to the owners that, you know, you've got to do something to get this stable. It all takes time, and we're getting emails every day on planning from the residents of Hayfield. They want it as a community asset, but it's a very awkward one because planning enforcement takes a long time and the thing's falling down.
Yeah.
So I don't know what can be done.
I guess that comes back to Alicia's point that if the central government gives some more enforcement powers, it gives you a bit more opportunity. In the absence of any other questions, I have a question. So when I look at the numbers, when you look at it at face value, it sort of suggests that the premiums on the council tax are not having as much of an impact as you might expect, or is it just that that's early days because we've only been doing it for a short while? Do you get any sense that it is or isn't having an impact on people? I don't know if that's for it's probably for Joanne actually.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think we've been sort of putting the premiums on now for a number of years, and the government have been reducing obviously the years, and I think the last one that we reduced, where we put the premium on from 1 year, I think it probably has impacted more on people being concerned now at doubling the payments for council tax. So I think this was the reason why when the government reduced the premium from 2 years to 1, they then introduced mandatory exceptions, because prior to that there were a couple of exceptions, and then it was up to the authority to have their own discretionary exceptions sort of approved. But so I think now, because the premium goes after 1 year, that probably isn't considered a long time for some people. So I think it is sort of making people think about buying properties that need to be renovated, because we do speak to some people that have purchased a property that is in need of repair, and of course we want properties to come back into use, but then they could be faced with a premium straight away on purchase of the property. So some of the exceptions now do help people like that, but I think we've probably had more contact since the premium came down to 1 year than we did when we initially were awarding it sort of for more years. But like I say, if you look at the percentage that are paying, 83% are paying bang on time, and you look at some of the charges on those accounts that are said earlier are significantly high, there's a lot of people that are still able to pay that premium and are willing to pay and are paying it on time. But then in comparison to your second aim, it does show that some are struggling with that. So I think now it's sort of what we really want to do, and this is what we're finding quite difficult, and we did this a number of years ago, is writing out to people that have got the premium to say, why is it standing there empty? You know, what are the reasons for that, so that we can understand that as an authority, and we can sort of show them what help they can get. But we just, you know, we're not getting a lot of response, and out of, I think it was a 63, we only got 5 responses. That's a very small response. So I think we're going to keep chipping away at that and trying to find out the reasons. But I think, as Alicia alluded to, there are a lot there where people have probably inherited these properties and probate's not fully been granted yet, so they're unable to sell them. Don't know if what Alicia wants to add any more to that.
Alicia?
So yeah, just to add really, I was just going to add to say that we sort of have almost a 2-tier system here. So we have properties that are in disrepair really, that, you know, we are tackling from environmental health as well as empty, but also we have the empty properties that are sound and that are okay and are in good condition really, and are not causing a nuisance or anything else. You know, so they're the ones as well that, you know, Joe is sort of alluding to there. So it's a sort of 2-pronged attack really. So yeah, I mean, we do have properties that are okay, but they're empty, and we just, you know, as officers, we are thinking, well, why are you leaving your property empty? Why don't you have someone in there renting it? Why don't you get an income in from it? We've got the renters' right bills coming down this coming year now, so maybe that might change things as well, and there may be a sort of avenue through that as well. That we can, you know, encourage people with empty properties to go down that route to, you know, to get them on the property and even, you know, if not sold, the rental property market. So, you know, we are hopeful. So I suppose the ones that have disrepair, we have more of a stick with them really, because we have other avenues to deal with. The ones that are sound, we're hitting them financially with the added council tax. Thank you. That's the only point, Chair.
I guess the reason for my question is we have to vote on this strategy or recommend it for the exec to approve. And it does sound like without those hard yards of people actually knocking on doors, sending letters, doing the enforcement, that the monetary impact in and of itself doesn't deliver the outcome. So you have to do all these other things. So that was the essence of the question.
Sorry, I was on. So yeah, just to come back to that. Sorry, just from our perspective, from an enforcement point of view, is that if the property is sound and it is just empty, then we have very little power if they are paying, you know, the council tax and the utilities, and they're keeping that property in a good condition. We don't have any real angle with that. To be able to, you know, we can knock the door as many times as we want, but we wouldn't be able to take any legal action against them from an enforcement point of view. Obviously, if it was in disrepair or dilapidated, then, you know, we can take enforcement action. So, you know, from an officer's perspective, that's what we're working with really from a legislation point of view.
That's useful to know. Thank you for that. So if there's no other questions, the recommendation was that the Corporate Select Committee recommend that the executive approve the empty property strategy, Appendix A, and enforced sales policy, Appendix B. Could I have a proposer? Thanks, Councillor Siddle. And a seconder? Oh, that's Councillor Siddle again. Hang on. Councillor McKeown, Bob McKeown. Thank you. So moving on in the agenda, and thanks, Joanna, and thanks, Alicia. Thank you. I need to get back to the agenda. Apologies. The next item on the agenda was any questions referred to the executive member services to be advised. I don't think there were any questions for the executive member, if I'm correct.
No.
Excellent, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is exclusion of the press and public. To resolve that the press and public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following items of business, as they may be disclosure and exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. So I'll just wait for you to cease the recording, Rachel.